What do you really know about Dusty Springfield? Considered by many of her peers to be the greatest British female singer of the 20th century, I don't think Dusty Springfield gets enough flowers nowadays. People tend to think of the beehive and beaded gowns, but Dusty was actually a total pioneer in what was very much a man's world. She possessed not only an incredibly distinctive and instantly recognisable voice, but also produced much of her own music and was creatively in control, something unheard of for female recording artists at the time. Her music crossed over multiple genres: soul, jazz, folk, dramatic ballads, disco and pop, and she had a number of her own TV shows and presented Ready Steady Go, an anarchic and totally new format of programme. Here, she had to fight to bring Motown artists like Stevie Wonder and Martha and the Vandellas over from the US to perform on the show, but by doing so almost single-handedly introduced the genre to the UK. She performed with Jimi Hendrix and helped Led Zeppelin get their first record deal. She came out as bisexual in 1970 at the peak of her fame. She was the first UK artist to refuse to perform at segregated concerts in apartheid South Africa and was thus kicked out of the country. All of this, and she was renowned for throwing food at people who were rude to waitstaff or hurling mini quiches at performers she didn't rate during their shows. Absolute rock star behaviour, if you ask me. So why is she so often just seen as the beehive and sparkles? Born Mary Isabel Louise Catherine Bernadette O'Brien to a staunch Catholic Irish immigrant family in April 1939 in northwest London, she was a shy and not very confident young girl who possessed a very unique and captivating voice that she reluctantly felt she had to share with the world. So she created Dusty Springfield: big bleached blonde bouffant hair, dark eye makeup, huge lashes and glittering gowns. I personally can't relate, and this became the image of Dusty we still all know. It served her really well at first, a mask for her to hide behind in front of the public, but she became trapped within this persona, one that remained stuck in the past with societal and social changes that were happening during the 60s. It ended up making her unhappy and dissatisfied, and her career suffered. She moved to LA to reinvent herself, but without any support network there, she spent much of the 70s and 80s drunk, using drugs, reclusive and depressed. Also, can't relate. It wasn't until the late 80s when the Pet Shop Boys approached her to feature on their music that she somewhat managed to shift her old image and the more authentic Dusty came to the forefront. Sadly, only a few years later, after this renewed success, she was diagnosed with breast cancer and she died in 1999. But still playing by her own rules, even after her death, she left everything to her cat. I love Dusty, and I think it's such a shame that she's often pigeonholed and remembered now only as the performer in the earliest incarnation of her career. She was by all accounts an absolute maverick and far more accomplished in her production work than she is given or took credit for. In 2026, Pink Pantheress has recently been the first female producer ever to win the Brit Award for Producer of the Year. 60 years ago, it was considered that it would be damaging to Dusty's career to take credit for her role in production, as it would spoil her public image. Charli XCX's film The Moment is an insight on how artists, especially women, are still trying to be pigeonholed to be marketable rather than allowed to explore the full breadth and scope of their artistry. And just like Dusty, Mariah Carey similarly gets little recognition for her production ability because of the mastery of her vocals. So has all that much changed since the 60s? I hope Dusty is remembered for being a rebel, a pioneer and an LGBTQ+ icon, rather than only for her beautiful sultry vocals and distinctive look. To me, the two definitive Dusty albums are Dusty in Memphis and Reputation, one from the earlier and one from the latter part of her career. My favourite tracks are Son of a Preacher Man, My Dad's Ordained, and In Private, a high-energy dance ballad about a secret love affair with someone married. Maybe a final can't relate. Dusty in Memphis was recorded in 1968 between the American Sound Studio in Memphis and Atlantic Records Studios in New York. Although now featured on almost every classic album list, it wasn't initially a commercial success at all. It failed to make it into the UK Top 40 album chart and peaked at 99 on the Billboard album chart in the US, despite featuring maybe her most famous song, Son of a Preacher Man. Dusty was known to be very self-critical and a perfectionist, and was often labelled as being difficult in the studio. Honestly, we have so little in common. But having signed with Atlantic Records, the same as her idol Aretha Franklin, Dusty was paired with Aretha's production team and put in the same studio to record Dusty in Memphis, and it was the first album that she hadn't produced herself. Dusty was presented with songs written by some of her favourite songwriters, who also happened to be some of mine. Carole King and Jerry Geffen, Randy Newman, and Burt Bacharach and Hal David. She didn't write her own material or consider herself a lyricist, and said she never thought too much about the words that she was singing. Jerry Wexler, who executive produced the album, said that she initially turned down all of the songs given to her, saying that they weren't good enough, but the same ones were presented to her a second time around, and these ones were better. Her friend and assistant Pat said that she was racked with indecision and a lack of self-confidence her whole life, and maybe this explains some of her difficult behaviour. She really struggled with imposter syndrome in Memphis, nervous to be working in the same space as her idol, and refused to record the vocals there. These were done later in New York, where she kept asking to have the track volume turned up louder in her headphones to drown out hearing her own singing. But none of this stopped this album being critically acclaimed, and it's now thought to be her seminal work. Dusty in Memphis opens with Just a Little Lovin', set in the mellow, sultry mood for the majority of the album. This first song is a waltz with shuffly hi-hats throughout that build up to a climactic end. Second is So Much Love, the first of 4 tracks written by Carole King and Jerry Geffen. The song has quite a simple chord progression throughout, but it switches to the relative minor in the bridge, which gives it that dramatic, classic Dusty ballad feel. And the most well-known track on the album follows, and is perhaps her most famous song, Son of a Preacher Man. It's a masterclass in making vocals sound effortless, cool, and conversational. The production is sparse, so all the elements really stand out. The beat's super swung, the horns are an instrumental hook in themselves, and the sprinkling of BVs make this the classic that it is. I Don't Want to Hear It Anymore is the 4th track and was written by Randy Newman. It features plucky strings and big, lush choral backing vocals from the Sweet Inspirations, the singing trio which included Cissy Houston, who was Whitney Houston's mother. Something about it makes me think of trip hop, and I wonder if it was any inspiration within the genre. Don't Forget About Me shifts the tempo up, and it has a lot more energy. There's lots of call and response vocals, oohs and ahs, and here you can definitely hear Dusty's love for Motown. And closing out side 1 is Breakfast in Bed, which is essentially an orgasm, but musically. The smoky, sexy, breathy intimacy that Dusty does so well is turned up to 11, and it's a song about a mistress begging her lover not to leave and to stay in bed with her. It does just fade out at the end, whereas I would quite like an actual finish, if you know what I mean. Opening side 2 is Just One Smile, and is probably my least favourite track on the album, but something about it does make me want to see it in a Tim Burton, Edward Scissorhands film sequence. Next up is Windmills of Your Mind, which is somewhat of an outlier on what otherwise feels like quite a sonically cohesive body of work. It's a dark, sexy bossa nova where the rhythm section and orchestration builds to a big climax at the end. The lyrics are quite surreal, and according to Dusty's manager, she had real trouble identifying with them. It was originally a French song translated into English, and a previously recorded version was used as the theme tune to the Thomas Crown Affair. In the Land of Make-Believe follows, and feels quite otherworldly, and it features more plucky strings. It's also the only Burt Bacharach and Hal David song on the album, where Dusty had previously sung their songs extensively. Penultimately is No Easy Way Down, which after Son of a Preacher Man is my favourite track on Dusty in Memphis. It's a super rich and full but mellow gospel sound, perfect for golden hour where everything's warm and lush and beautiful. Track 11 in closing is I Can't Make It Alone, which is a dramatic ballad and the longest song on the album at nearly 4 minutes. It has a real sense of longing and plaintive lyrics like Now You Know Me, so it makes sense to have this song to end with. It's that very full wall of sound style that Dusty loved, and it does make me want to listen to the album over again once it fades out. Reputation was released in 1990 and was the first album Dusty had put out in 8 years after her ongoing battles with drug addiction, alcoholism and self-harm. She was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder in the 80s and received treatment. This was a larger follow-up project alongside the Pet Shop Boys after the huge success that had been What Have I Done to Deserve This?, the second single from their album called Actually. Dusty had provided the lead vocals for the hit, and in a similar way that Dusty had fought to bring Motown artists to the UK in the 60s, Neil Tennant had had to fight the record label to have Dusty on this track. EMI Records had little faith due to her decline in popularity and her turbulent years in LA, but the Pet Shop Boys insisted it had to be her. Dusty in Memphis was Tennant's all-time favourite record, and when What Have I Done to Deserve This went to number 2 in the UK and the US, shockingly, the artists were proved right. Still a perfectionist and her own worst critic, the Pet Shop Boys say she would stand in front of the microphone in the studio with a cigarette in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, sing one syllable of one word, step back, ask to rewind and start the phrase again, for every single line. Reputation opens with the title track, and it's a bold start. Big crashing waves of warm synths and keys and distorted vocals. Think Kate Bush, Hounds of Love era. The drums kick in at about 128 BPM before all dropping out again and Dusty's vocals coming in up front. After so many years of conjecture about her sexuality, it feels like a definite I'm back and you statement, with the main chorus hook being who cares what they're thinking, who cares what they're whispering. It's a big gay anthem. Track 2, Send It To Me, slows things down but keeps things very synth heavy with a squealing lead line and a sax part coming in for the latter part of the track. Maybe not a timeless classic, but it's very of the time. Arrested by You follows and takes things fully into ballad territory. Probably the weakest track on the album, it starts off letting Dusty's vocals breathe on some pretty arpeggiation, but once everything kicks in, it loses any strength. And as much as I love a key change, this one feels very sickly sweet. It's much too saccharine for Dusty's husk. Things pick up into danceable territory again on Time Waits for No One, with a slap bass line and a hefty kick drum featuring heavily, before getting into Born This Way, which closes side A. These last two tracks were produced by disco heavyweight Dan Hartman of Relight My Fire fame, and you can hear his style clearly on both, but particularly the latter. It's a big gospel anthem with all of the horns, descending piano chords, and huge choral BVs declaring, I was born this way. I think Gaga must have been inspired by this song that predates her version by almost 20 years. I don't know why this track isn't more remembered, but I endeavour to revive it during my DJ sets. In Private, written and produced by the Pet Shop Boys, is for me the ultimate sad dance floor banger and is a permanent fixture in my top 5 favourite songs of all time. Heart-wrenching lyrics, especially for anyone who's been kept a secret, hit home in a big way against a musical backdrop of legato strings and more descending pianos. Super swung claps and clopping percussion heighten the sense of contained urgency and withheld feelings. It sounds like biting back tears, but just managing to hold it together. Unless you're me at Horsemeat a few years ago when I fully ugly wept to this song the first time that I DJ'd there. I play the 12-inch version, which also includes an incredible drum break, but it's Dusty's vocals and delivery that make this song so special for me. As she did with most of her recordings, each section has a slight variation in it, verses with slightly different timings or emphases on slightly different syllables, subtle melodic changes, or little different runs in the chorus, and this is what I think makes her recordings sound so alive and emotionally visceral. I feel quite passionately about this perfectly executed masterpiece, if you couldn't tell, and will play it in a DJ set at any given opportunity. It's a tough track to follow, but next is Daydreaming, which feels very classic Pet Shop Boys too, and has Dusty doing a more spoken word rap style. It's much slower and mellower, there's a very dreamy bridge, and I really like the EQing and effects on the vocals. Next is Nothing Has Been Proved, which is tense, mysterious, has a very film noir feel, and this makes sense as it was written for the theme tune to the film Scandal. It was this song that cemented the Dusty and Pet Shop Boys partnership following What Have I Done to Deserve This. I Want to Stay Here, written by longtime collaborators Carole King and Jerry Geffen, is a bit of an unnecessary palate cleanser after the darkness of the previous track, whereas the closing track, Occupy Your Mind, is the direction I'd have loved to hear Dusty go further in had she not sadly become unwell with breast cancer. It's a proper tune made for the dance floor at 6 minutes 51 seconds, and it's the longest song on the album by a long way. At a chuggy 110 BPM, this acid house style banger with frantic cowbells is probably the furthest removed from what you'd expect from Dusty Springfield. But it actually makes a lot of sense, as her husky, breathy voice does sometimes sound like she's at the end of a late night, early morning Ibiza sesh. I'm just saying. Dusty Springfield's voice is almost instantly recognisable. Burt Bacharach said you only had to hear 3 notes and you knew it was her. Breathy but not breathless, and with an unshakable warmth and husk throughout her mezzo-soprano range, Dusty's voice was able to suit almost any genre, but always remain undeniably her. Many of Dusty's albums are really compilations of very different songs and styles that with some other artists would not make sense as a body of work. However, her unique tone, which is so listenable, unifies them. She said early on in her career that she thought of herself as an instrument within an orchestra rather than a lead singer, and perhaps this, alongside her nerves, was why she really struggled recording vocals in Memphis, as here she was only singing to very stripped-back rhythm tracks. Dusty's earlier vocals always sounded so emotional, but also effortless, without strain or grip or unintended tension. But the years of smoking, drug and alcohol abuse took their toll later in life, and although keeping her tone, she did lose some of her power. A backing singer who was also a close friend said that he thought that part of her appeal to her gay audience in her latter years, as well as being openly bisexual, was the tragic singer archetype that gay men particularly seemed to love. You can think of Judy Garland, Marlene Dietrich or Marilyn Monroe, who came before her. Dusty was dubbed by the press as the blue-eyed Queen of Soul, a title that she was said to have never liked and was uncomfortable with. White performers achieving greater acclaim and success than their black contemporaries through the 50s and 60s was a product of much more overt racism within society. However, Dusty was an advocate and ally against the oppression of people of colour. When touring in South Africa, she had it written into her contracts that she would not perform to segregated audiences. She completed 5 of 7 scheduled shows to mixed audiences before the government deported her back to the UK for breaking apartheid law. In 1964, she was the only white artist on an otherwise all-black lineup for a legendary run of shows in New York at the Brooklyn Fox Theatre. She was very much considered to be part of the R&B community, having used her position on BBC television to introduce Motown to the UK. Rather than just covering and performing music from black Tamil and Motown artists, she insisted that they had to come over to Britain and be recognised for their work. Before becoming a solo artist, Dusty had sung with 2 groups, the Lana Sisters, who weren't actually related, and the Springfields, which did actually include her older brother Tom. When with the Lana Sisters, she really learnt about performing, lights, staging, and how to use a microphone, and as the sole member of the Springfields with this experience, she had to take charge for them on the technical front. This was knowledge that she continued to expand on and utilise throughout her career, often staging and directing her own performances, something that was very unusual for a female performer. Her iconic performance style of bringing her hands and wrists to her face in short, sharp gestures was actually because she was so short-sighted and forgetful that she would have the lyrics written in biro on various parts of her arm and had to bring them that close to read them. High camp. Not being able to see past arm's length also meant she couldn't see the audience while she was performing, or even people across the room at parties, who then thought that she was ignoring them. It was also why her makeup was so dark and graphic, as she couldn't see to apply it. All these things contributed to her reputation as a diva, but really it was down to her bad eyesight and reluctance to wear glasses, having been bullied for them growing up. I love discovering how legends are born, when in reality it could be something so simple and relatable as poor eyes. Dusty came out as bisexual to the press in an interview with the London Evening Standard in 1970, saying, "I'm as perfectly capable of being swayed by a girl as by a boy. More and more people feel that way, and I don't see why I shouldn't." Although many people close to her believed that she was actually a lesbian, she told Gay News in 1978, "People can draw their own conclusions, and I don't give a damn. I'm not going to commit myself to being homosexual or heterosexual, because people are going to write what they want about me. They always have. Actually, you can print this. I'm having a 3-way with Princess Anne and one of her horses." She had a long-term relationship with singer-songwriter Norma Tanaga throughout the 60s, before Norma moved back to the US at the end of the decade. They lived together here in Kensington and had a pink Thunderbird car. Dusty was said to have had quite intense and volatile relationships, but none more so than with Teddy Brackey, whom she was married to. It wasn't legally recognised, but they did exchange vows when they were living together in LA. They met at Alcoholics Anonymous and reportedly had one particular fight that involved a frying pan and some reconstructive surgery. Raised as a staunch Catholic in a convent school, Dusty was said to have struggled massively with her sexuality. She knew who she was, but apparently struggled with accepting it. It sadly comes as no surprise that her popularity waned after she came out at a time when doing so was almost unheard of for artists.